Good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we have a lot to talk about this morning. I do want to highlight that we'll be talking with Marshall Hyde, the candidate for Corning City Council in the 4th Ward. We had his opponent on just the other day, so that'll be coming up here in just a little bit. We're trying to I'm not positive about the theme. I appreciate I had quite a few people come up to me yesterday and tell me about the theme music playing a little loud, and I appreciate that. I appreciate you watching the program as well. I think I kind of fixed it right there, so we'll see. All right, as always, you can contact me if you have any questions for our guests, or if you want to weigh in on the topics of the day. If you're not aware, the president is in Israel. As of right now, he has landed. We'll talk about that in just a moment. The IDF has confirmed that the misfired rocket, that deadly blast at the Gaza hospital, they have confirmed that it was from Islamic Jihad. The Israeli Foreign Ministry released a photo taken by IDF radar footage showing the trajectory of the misfired rocket that killed hundreds at a Gaza hospital. Now, you may have seen there were many just like there's the kind of the Blame America First crowd, there was many from the squad and some in the media to blame Israel on this. Now, during the beginnings of his trip, the president saying to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, it looks like it was done by the other team, which is a very odd way of wording that, but meaning that it wasn't done by Israel. And there's always this weird, it's really troubling, actually, to blame Israel and to not accept the fact that Israel is not looking for civilian casualties. They do everything in their power not to have that happen because they know, obviously, there's so many in the media, so many people quick to blame them. So the president saying, and I should probably put it up on the screen here, the president saying early this morning, I was outraged by the bombing of the hospital yesterday. Based on what I've seen, it was done by the other team, not you. He was saying that to Benjamin Netanyahu. But this is interesting. There's a caveat. But there's a lot of people out there who are not sure. The world is looking, he said. This again, President Biden. Israel has a value set like the United States does and other democracies. And they're looking to see what we're going to do. I'm not sure why you had to put that last line in, and you can criticize the term team. I mean, I don't really think that's necessary, just a weird way to word it. But to say, but there's a lot of people out there who are not sure, and a group of people, the squad, are not sure, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. But he also urged Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu now says that he had urged the president to imagine what the Israeli children were imaging when Hamas fighters broke into their homes and found their hiding spots. And that's when the president, Joe Biden, responded, it's beyond my comprehension. They've committed atrocities that make ISIS somewhat more rational. That's the second time he's used that kind of comparison. I'm not sure if he said ISIS the first time or Al-Qaeda. I can't remember. But saying it almost makes them look rational, or they look, it's always downplaying those groups. Saying, and I'm trying to think exactly how he said it the last time there. He's saying seem more rational, but seem like child's play or something really ridiculous like that. But again, this is not to criticize what was said. It's just something that the world's looking at the president right now and looking at what Israel's doing as well. So words have meanings, and sometimes you have to kind of read between the lines. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to look at the people that were so quick to blame Israel. When we come back, I'd love to have you weigh in on this. You see the contact number on the bottom of the screen. So please stay with us. It's time for our first commercial break, and then we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio, and you just saw the beautiful view overlooking Market Street here in downtown Corning. So the squad was very quick, members specifically Omar and Talib, to blame Israel for this deadly hospital bombing, and the pictures are just disturbing, obviously. But there's always that knee jerk from certain groups to blame Israel. And then they continued to call for the ceasefire. Far left squad members, Representative Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, pointed the blame on Israel for Tuesday's bombing. Now, again, if you're just joining us, it has been confirmed that was, again, a Islamic Jihad group. Oh, and one other thing, just quickly. We will talk about the speaker's race in just a little bit. I know Jim Jordan, they did not go up for another vote yesterday. There was some back and forth on that, so we'll talk about that. But so they demanded that President Biden call for a ceasefire when he was on his trip. Well, he is on his trip, I should say. Bombing a hospital, this is Ilhan Omar. Bombing a hospital is among the gravest of war crimes. The IDF reportedly blowing up one of the few places the injured and wounded can seek medical treatment and shelter during a war is horrific. Now, this is not waiting any time to find out what had actually happened. This was the initial thought to blame Israel. The president needs to push for an immediate ceasefire to end this slaughter. Tlaib saying Israel just bombed, listen to this, so confident in the wording here. Israel just bombed the Baptist hospital, killing 500 Palestinians, doctors, children, patients. Just like that. The president, this is what happens when you refuse to facilitate a ceasefire and help de-escalate your war and destruction, or de-escalate, excuse me. Your war and destruction only approach has opened my eyes, and many Palestinian Americans and Muslim Americans like me, we will remember where you stood. So blame there. We've got to take a short break because our guest is here, so stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio, and I'd like to thank our guests for being in the studio. Marshall, thanks so much for being on the program.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So we've got a lot to talk about, but first I'd like to ask the simple question. How's the campaign going?
Campaign is going, it's going fine. This is my third campaign.
Yeah. Was that right?
You learn a little bit each time. Yeah, the first time I ran was 2018. It was to fill the last year of Mayor Boland's term. He had been our fourth ward council member.
Sure.
Was elected mayor. Someone got appointed, and I thought, I'd like to try for that. So I ran one in 2018. That was for a year. Then I ran for a full term, and it was not my intention to run again. I thought 5 years, half a decade of service. That's good. But last winter, the mayor reached out to me and said, we'd like to have you, like to see you still be on council.
Sure.
The local committee said, we'd really like to keep you there. And I said, well, let me see what constituents think, because that's the most important.
That's who matters.
Those are the folks that I'm working for. So I talked to constituents around the Fourth Ward, and they said, yeah, run again. Yeah. So this is absolutely going to be my last time. So each campaign's different.
Mm-hmm.
But I think things are going well.
Well, good.
You can't just count on the power of the incumbency to propel you forward.
A lot of people made that mistake.
You have to earn it each time.
Yes. So. And you mentioned it's Fourth Ward. Could you describe to people that maybe aren't familiar but are in the Corning area, what is the Fourth Ward? Who can vote for you?
So, Fourth Ward, the city Corning is divided into 8 wards, 4 on each side of the river. Mm-hmm. Fourth Ward is on the south side hill on the westernmost edge, and it runs from basically Bridge Street.
Okay.
Wegmans is in the Fourth Ward.
Okay.
So, so Bridge Street, and if you were to follow that up the hill, the road breaks there a little bit. You've got a Bridge Street extension, but it's down State Street, up to 5th, over to Chestnut, up to 6th, over to Powder House Road, and stops at the city limits there, and then just goes all the way west. So Field Street is the last, I think, public street heading north-south. Sunset extends, and there's apartments back there. There's Mountain View Terrace and all those other places. So that's the area. And it's not the biggest ward in area. I think Fifth Ward is bigger in square footage.
But you're still getting your steps in as you campaign.
You get your steps in. And campaigning, campaigning isn't fun. The idea of you've got an opponent isn't fun. I'm not running against an opponent, I'm running on what I've done and what I
Sure.
hope to do, as I'm sure they're running on what they hope to do. They're not running against me. That whole thing it becomes
Yeah.
a horse race.
Mm-hmm.
So, campaigning, the good part is knocking on doors and meeting people.
Right.
And finding people who say no one has ever stopped and knocked on my door and asked my opinion.
Yeah.
And that's really
that
powerful
nice?
when you get to do that. Makes me think we should have like a national Meet the Neighbors Day.
I agree.
And for your street and a block street on either side, and like maybe everybody on the odd side of the
Yeah.
street hosts
Yeah.
one weekend and then the next weekend, and you just get to meet each other
Yeah.
because, so many of the, perceived differences,
Aren't they?
they're not really there when you start talking to people.
No, and I do think it's interesting, and I've said this with a lot of candidates. The things that you learn when you're knocking on doors, maybe that you weren't even aware of. You could be here your whole life, and you talk to them, and the number one issue in their mind is something that may not even have been on your radar. And I think that's really important for a candidate to realize when they're knocking on doors. It's an eye-opening experience.
And for the most part, I mean, the role of a council member in the city of Corning, it's dictated by the city charter.
Sure.
And there's people think we can do things that we can't
Of
do. We have a
course.
city manager that runs the place.
Right.
We are not enforcement. We are not. We don't carry things out, but we can set a tone. We can set a direction.
Sure.
And when you talk to people, most of the issues are really small quality of life things. Potholes in front of the house.
Of course.
Tree that's dying and dropping limbs, and you think, oh, I want, where's the big and meaty social issues I can fix? There really aren't, for the most part, that people are bringing up now. There are concerns people have brought up in the last couple of years: the opioid addiction,
Of course.
homelessness is becoming more apparent. The unhoused. I work at the public library, have for the last 5.5 years. A lot of people spend their days there because it's safe and warm, and then they go out to who knows where.
Right.
These are things that have to be addressed. These are things that are a challenge for the city because the city doesn't really have those resources.
Right.
I think we can partner with county and state level agencies and organizations and governmental bodies to try to come up with something. But it is a real challenge.
It is. And have you heard from a lot of people when you're knocking on doors about the homelessness issue and maybe the public safety issue? Or?
Not so much. I haven't heard many people talk about public safety as a concern.
Okay.
We've got a great police department.
Of course.
We've got a great chief.
Yes.
Chief Spaulding, both Chief Spauldings
Yes.
live just 2 blocks down the street from me. They're Fourth Ward residents, and I don't know all the local officers, but there are a few I talk with over and over and over again. They stop on the front porch when they're delivering, messages from City Hall, and we have great conversations. They're all really good, committed people, and I think we're pretty much funding everything that the police have asked for. In fact, there's going to be a new K-9 unit.
Yeah.
That's
I
developing.
heard about that. That's great.
Yeah, and it's public safety. I haven't really heard any concerns about that. There are people who have concerns about the way things look.
Sure. Okay.
So
That's
when they see people gathering outside of buildings, and
Sure.
they think, "Who are those people? What are they doing? Up to no good."
Right.
I think it's important to cut people a little slack.
Sure.
And find out what their issues and needs are, and then find out how we can address it. And again, it's going to be a challenge
Of
for the
course.
city government to do.
So when you reflect on your time on the council, what are you perhaps most proud of?
I am really pleased by the way we all work together.
Yeah.
It's not.
Not the
It's
old
not
days.
like-
I don't want to say anything, but
Yeah, I've heard stories.
Yes.
But I'm really pleased how we all, and we can disagree,
Of course.
and we can get, a little in each other's face every once in a while, usually out of the council chambers on an issue. But really, I mean, if you go back and look through minutes from council meetings, we vote as a block because almost everything that comes across the desk is for the good of the city.
Right.
We have differences of opinion on some issues. St. Vincent's development is the former church property
of
right
course,
on the
yeah.
north side. It was a great proposal. I think Housing Visions had a fantastic proposal. Residents in the neighborhood were put off by it. They had, I think, incorrect ideas of who these people moving in would be, and that it would, bring down the neighborhood. And it was pretty contentious, and there was a lot of unhappiness. And I went around before the vote on the weekend before and went door to door and knocked on doors and talked to people. Not my ward, but
it's still
my city,
important.
and each of us has an effect on the whole city. And there was universal either resignation that it was going to happen against their wishes, or they were unhappy with it. So I voted against it.
Yeah.
I bucked the consensus, which, kind of surprised me. But I thought, how can this succeed if there's that much opposition to it?
Right.
And, Mark Rousseau, who's a Republican council member from that ward, Kate Patterson, a Democrat here on the South Side in Ward 2. We were, maybe people thought unlikely, it wasn't a coalition, it wasn't coordinated.
Right.
But we all had different reasons for thinking we can't support this the way it is now. And then after that, I went to Father Jones at the church. I talked to people who were in opposition, because as soon as it didn't pass, everybody came out of the woodwork and said, "Oh, we're for it."
Yeah.
Where were you? So
That's the nature, right?
right, if you people out there in TV land, if you remember anything from what I'm saying today, is get involved.
Yes.
Speak up. Come to council meetings. You don't have to come to a council meeting to make your opinion known, but speak up. Tell your council members, write letters, come to council meetings. You have a right to do that. You have a right to speak. No one's going to take your name down and put you on a list,
I know.
It's really important that you voice your opinion.
Yes.
So I worked as hard as I could to try to put something together behind the scenes. Other people were doing the same. I wasn't able to get the groups together like I'd hoped, but Housing Visions came back. They reached out. They made concessions. They changed the plan a little bit, and they bought the support. I mean, that sounds bad.
We know what you mean.
Earned the
They
support of the neighbors, and now the project is going through with neighborhood support. So I think, that's not a success of mine, or even necessarily a success of the councils, but it shows that the process can work.
Yes.
Sometimes it goes through some painful birthing,
Yes.
steps, but in the end, it's going to be developed. It's going to be great. The neighbors have bought into it, and I think that's a success.
And I think, to your point, I think it's unfortunate when, and it's not just Corning City Council, it's town boards everywhere, when something gets passed or doesn't get passed, and then people are outraged after. It's if you just got to go to a meeting. I say it all the time, but it's the local level that affects your life so much day to day. And I say this all the time.
Absolutely.
And I know everybody's lives are busy, but if you can take the time out every great once in a while to go to a council meeting, it can make such a world of difference.
Oh, and there are people that, before I ran for office, I started going maybe a year and a half before I ran, thinking, I got to see what happens here. I got to understand how local government works.
Sure.
See what the issues are. If I have any thought at all, and at the time I started, I probably didn't really think I was going to run, but it's really important. And I'm seeing some new faces there. There are some regular faces, but just get involved, participate.
Yeah.
Because things can be very contentious on the national level, and there's this sort of tribal party division.
It all trickles over in people's mind.
And people bring that into local politics where, honestly, on council, I'm not seeing it.
No.
And maybe in campaigning, people, not local,
right.
local congressional level, some of that stuff spills over. But if you come to a council meeting, you're not going to get yelled at.
No. You're actually going to be welcomed.
You're going to be welcomed, and you'll get a better response if you bring up an issue than if you tell me, and I bring up the issue.
Sure.
It's like, him again.
Yeah, who told you that? Yeah. So when you look, if you were lucky enough to be reelected, what were your goals for the next 4 years?
Well, because, again, the power of council, it's great, but it's limited to certain areas. One of the things I think we can do is be a voice. So again, we give guidance
Right.
to city management, to the city manager and city staff. So let's set some visions. Now the city is doing a big new
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah.
Hasn't been done in 20 years to look at the future, how things are going to develop, grow, what the issues are. It's got a huge community citizen committee
Yeah.
with a few council members on it and the mayor. That's exciting.
Yes.
I think if we're going to look at issues like addiction and homelessness and mental health, we need a committee. Get citizens on it.
Right.
Reach out and find out who beyond the small, less than 3.5 square mile borders of Corning
Right.
can assist us. Where can we find funding? Where can we find expertise? It's always a challenge to talk to anybody in county government. They want to hire the best
Of course.
to come down,
Yeah.
and you got to lure them to rural upstate New York. And they can get paid a lot more by going to Buffalo,
Of course.
Rochester, or New York City, or almost any city than we can pay. So that's always going to be a challenge. But there are people who are somewhat altruistic, not only motivated by money, who will come. But we have to really reach out. So what I want to see, I think that would be a great thing to have a committee started with that. There's a lot of little tiny quality of life things.
Oh, of course.
That would be sidewalks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're anybody who walks the city of Corning, and it's a beautiful city for walking, some of our sidewalks are terrible.
Yeah.
So, I've got some ideas for possible ways to help, homeowners with that, landlords with that. I got a few ideas. I'm not ready to spill them all
Okay,
right now.
okay,
We'll
that's
see what
fair.
happens.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Just before we go, because we're running late here already, it's unbelievable. I know. What has surprised you the most about being on the council all these years?
Wow, I've never gotten that one before. What a surprise!
Well, how many questions are you getting all the time?
Oh, well, usually about real particular
Yeah,
minutiae, not sort of.
Yeah.
But yeah, what has surprised me? How accessible it is, I guess.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, so here I am. I moved to Corning in 2001. Was a glassmaker. I came here because I'd been taking classes at the studio, the museum. I thought, if I'm going to live anywhere that will understand glassmaking, it's Corning.
It's probably, yeah.
I looked at the arts community here. I looked at the museums we've got, with the Rockwell and the amazing CMOG, and got involved in all kinds of things, but not really government, other than voting all the time.
Right.
And folks, please vote.
Vote,
It is
November 7th.
It is right November 7th at the library.
Okay.
It's usually been in the recent years at the Union Hall, but early voting starts October 28th and runs through the 5th. That is at the library, and then general election day is at the
Oh, wow.
library. I think it's 6 to 9.
Okay.
On the
That's
7th.
good to know.
Yeah. So yeah, people will have to switch gears. But if they make it to the Union Hall, hopefully they'll see the signs pointing them to the library. So I wasn't involved, but when I did decide to start paying more attention, to be one of those citizens who went to council meetings, council's just made up of your neighbors.
Right, exactly.
We didn't go study political science at Harvard. We're glassmakers, we're builders, we're homemakers, we're executives, we're all kinds of different people. Again, you can come, talk to us, speak up. When you do that, you're going to get a response. I promise.
And people don't understand, but you will be welcomed with open arms.
Absolutely.
Because
absolutely.
I think I don't want to speak for everybody that's ever been on a board, but you want to see the public there. If it's just you on the council talking to each other, it almost seems like, it seems weird, I suppose.
We have, people talk about taxes and budgeting and, where's the money going? And so, every spring, the city manager puts together the city budget, gives us this big, thick book of projected costs, current costs, this sort of thing, and goes out department by department over 4 days to give us this really thorough grounding in what's happening. The city's pretty thrifty. The city manager and the staff have done a great job of accounting for every penny, and I don't think there's any real fat there. But the public's never at those things.
I know.
If you're don't like taxes, if you want to see where the money's going, come to these. It's posted on the city website, cityofcorning.com. Go to the meetings, look at the notices. It'll give you the agendas. Come and participate, learn about this stuff.
Yep.
Sometimes it is a little boring.
Yeah. But what is
But
it? Yes.
it's an education.
It is. So before we go, how can people help your campaign?
Gosh, I had a couple of neighbors on Highland. I don't think either one of them is a registered Democrat, but they wanted one of my signs, and then emailed me and said, "Hey, we'd like to pay for the sign to support your campaign." And I said, "I bought the signs in 2018. They're paid for it,
and then some. Yeah.
I don't need a whole lot of funding, and this is the sort of thing I guess politicians aren't supposed to say.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I've gotten the endorsement of the 1199 SEIU, which is the United Healthcare Workers Union East. It's a division of the Service Employees International Union. They sent financial support. I got local committee support. I've had the mayor and others come up and hand me checks. So I'm doing okay. So I told them, look, thanks. Send the money to the SPCA or the food bank.
There you go.
And I got a letter from the food bank last week
That's nice.
saying a donation, was made in your name by these people. And I thought that's really sweet. So again, how can they support my campaign? If you're going to vote for me, talk to your friends and neighbors. Bring people with you to the polls. Whoever you vote for, turn out. That's the best thing you can do.
Thing.
That's democracy at work. I have worked with the Board of Elections on years I wasn't running as a poll worker.
They're a great group.
Yeah. And it's up and up. They're good folks. They're volunteers.
Yeah.
I guess you do get paid, but
Wow,
it's
you're not
nominal.
making a fortune.
Yeah. Nobody's
You're buying
motivated by the
lunch.
money.
Yeah.
And nobody's motivated by the money for city council either.
No.
Yeah, the pay there is it's an honorarium, I guess, or
Okay.
a token. You say in a way.
Yeah.
But yeah. So you want to help my campaign? Vote.
And
Hopefully, vote for me. But
but vote. What would you say to the voters before they head to the booth on November 7th?
Think about the future you want. The future of Corning doesn't depend on any one person. My election or non-re-election won't change the city. But think of what you want. Talk to the people who can affect the change, and some of them may not be in government. It may be other groups,
Right.
and find a way to get involved on your own. Whether it's volunteering time. During COVID, the library was shut down.
Right.
And on Fridays, I would go to the food bank. I did that for months. And we all wore masks, and we unpacked and redistributed food and put together lunch packs. Anything you can do at any level, whether it's through your church, social clubs, just on your own as an individual, Meals on Wheels, get involved. Yeah. And if you're thinking in that way as you go to the polls, I think hopefully it'll be clear who to vote for.
Great. Well, thanks so much for giving us all this time and being on the show this morning.
Sure.
All
It's
right.
my pleasure again. Thanks
Well,
for
best
giving me
of
the
luck.
opportunity.
All right. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Thank you again to our guest, Marshall Hyde, candidate for Corning City Council in the 4th Ward. I really appreciate him being on the program. We are going to have to take another short break here in just a moment. Because I'm running just a little bit late. Our interview went a little long. I do want to talk more about, obviously, Israel. We do have not necessarily updates from the speaker's race. If you followed it yesterday, we thought there'd be a second vote, but apparently in conference, it looks as if Jim Jordan had not chipped away at the 20 that voted against him. And it wasn't just for, it was a myriad of names. Some people voted for McCarthy, some for Scalise. So we will talk about that as best as we can. I do have to take another short break, but you can reach out and contact me. And I forgot to add a wave in the middle of that. But if you have any questions, comments, concerns, I would like to read those at the end of the program if we have the time. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. Thank you again for joining us. Okay, so Hezbollah has announced today to be a day of unprecedented anger against Israel. And there's been protests that have erupted outside of U.S. embassies, Israeli embassies. This is in regards to, of course, and we found out the truth since, but the bombing of that hospital where so many were quick to blame Israel. That not the case as we started the program this morning, that the IDF says reports confirm the misfired rocket was from Islamic Jihad that caused a deadly blast at a Gaza hospital. There is a report coming from Axios that the White House has discussed U.S. military response if Hezbollah attacks Israel. Lebanon-based Hezbollah joining the war would escalate, of course, the Middle East's worst conflict in decades, raising the likelihood of mass civilian casualties in Israel and Lebanon and possibly drawing in the U.S. I'm going through some things quickly here, not because we're running short on time, but just because there's so much to get to, and I still want to talk about the speaker's race, of course. Indicted Senator Bob Menendez, he will not be allowed in on the briefing, the classified briefing on Israel. Senator Bob Menendez will not attend a classified briefing on Israel this week amid accusations that he acted as an unregistered foreign agent of the Egyptian government. Chuck Schumer saying he's not going to attend the briefing tomorrow. I've had private conversations. I don't get involved in what happened in them on this kind of thing. He's not attending. Did you see that? Who was it? Gayle King was talking to Schumer, and why don't you just basically ask Menendez to resign, and kept going back and forth. Eventually, because he wouldn't answer, she goes, okay, so this is clearly something you don't want to talk about. He's staying loyal. Schumer is staying loyal to Bob Menendez. There is an interesting piece here about the conflict. It says here, Israel-Hamas conflict spilling over in the newsroom into shouting matches. This is from Yahoo. But they go through some of this Brianna Joy Gray on the Hill. I guess there's been a lot of back and forth on her. One person put it as, quote, finding ways to justify Hamas's actions. And it just goes through some of the examples of this. And we've talked about it frequently here on the program. The media's, just like when I talked about the squad this morning, the media's initial reaction is to blame Israel. It's very frustrating. It's very troubling. It's very disturbing. I would say even some of the language that's being used, I think, very similar to what we're unfortunately hearing on college campuses. It's really turning into, you see, some people, you see it very clear, the anti-Semitism. Some of the language being used is trying to hide the anti-Semitism through certain wordage. And in this case, he gives, there's three people that wrote this piece, but giving numerous examples of the media and their questionable reporting on this and actually causing strains inside the newsroom. The New York Post editorial board says it's time for Joe Biden to stand up to Iran, the root of the Mideast evil. And when we come back from our next break, which we got to take a break here in just a second, we will talk about the speaker's race. But I wanted to give you the plan that the Post editorial board came up with. For starters, Biden should immediately end all further nuclear talks and reimpose the toughest possible sanctions on Tehran. As it stands, his sanctions relief has allowed Tehran to move from just $4 billion in available global reserves when Biden took office to over $40 billion today. And then step one, officially refreeze the $6 billion he released in that misguided ransom payment for U.S. hostages. 2, drop the delusional efforts to pretend Iran's rulers didn't collude in and sign off on the October 7th terror assault, the worst atrocity against Jews since the Holocaust. And 3, answer Iran's latest outrageous threat, like the preemptive action that we heard about. So that was just a quick, and I wish we had more time to talk about this, but I realized that we've only got about 15 minutes left. So stay with us. We will be back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Receive a comment during break. So sad to see Biden having to read his remarks from note cards. Not confidence inspiring. If you're just tuning in, the president is in Israel. I had mentioned the New York Post editorial board having the piece that it's time for Joe Biden to stand up to Iran, the root of Mideast evil. And it ends on this, and I wanted to mention it before break, but let me return to it, and then we'll get to the speaker. Biden's actions, or lack thereof, will shape the future not only of the region, but the world. Obviously, there's connections. There's a lot of talks about China and Russia's involvement, what will ultimately be, not their involvement as in the attacks, but what this means for that relationship, what it means with Taiwan if China sees a weakness. There's a lot of questions here, but I'll continue. The only question now is, does he, meaning President Biden, have the courage, wisdom, and backbone to meet this monumental challenge? And that challenge, according to the New York Post editorial board, is to stand up to Iran. Okay, the House Speaker election. Boy, how many times since McCarthy got ousted do you think you've heard the word chaos? What would you set that over under on? But the House called it a day yesterday. We thought there would be a second vote, but Jordan failed the first time around by 20 Republican votes. They had a conference. They thought maybe there would be the second, and apparently he did not get the number needed. Something that the media has been focusing on is the fact the House Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, actually bested him, meaning numbers-wise, not enough to get the speaker, don't worry. Bested Jordan, drawing 212 votes to Jordan's 200. There were 20 votes for other candidates. So when we come back, we're going to tell you a little bit of what this means, what to look for today, if whether or not Jordan, there's supposed to be a vote today, whether or not Jordan can secure it. Of course, as is the case, he's very confident. He's said that he's confident he will be elected Speaker of the House. But we'll tell you what this all means when we come back. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Thank you again for joining us here on Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. So Jim Jordan, they plan on, and things like this change quite frequently, but the House is slated to hold a second speaker vote at 11 a.m. this morning, and this is a pivotal moment of whether or not Jim Jordan has success, gets closer to success, or goes by the wayside like Steve Scalise. Now, you got to recall, though, it took former Speaker Kevin McCarthy 15 rounds of voting in January. Remember that? People were watching C-SPAN like it was a football game for a while there. But it's not clear if Jordan has a viable path forward. 20 is a lot to overcome. But he said to CNN that he will keep going. Quote, "We are going to keep working. We will get to the votes." And we do. I know we got to take one more short break, but I want to talk about Jeffries for a moment, because there was actually a piece from Roll Call that said, if Jeffries ends up getting some type of power in this to pick the speaker, don't get greedy. That's the exact line. And if Jeffries does get a chance to resolve the paralysis in the House, the Democrat leader should remember one of the fundamental rules of politics: don't get greedy. That's a fundamental rule of politics, number one. I could point to some people that maybe didn't heed that command, but don't get greedy. So we're to expect that he would pick somebody more moderate. Yet he said that Jordan, and this was just yesterday, Jordan is, quote, the poster child of MAGA extremism. So what would make you think that when Democrats voted with those 8 Republicans to oust a speaker that was willing to compromise on the continuing resolution, what would make you think that he wouldn't get greedy? What would make you think he would want to actually have someone in there that would compromise, that would work together? I mean, it's all smoke and mirrors when it's the media. I want to talk a little bit more about this, but we do have to take that break. Stay with us. Last break, and then we're going to wrap things up here on Frankly Speaking. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. So as I was mentioning, Jeffries blasted Jordan as a poster child of MAGA extremism. He went on to say, and I think this is very disingenuous, this is, again, Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, saying that, quote, House Democrats have made it clear that they are ready, willing, and able to find bipartisan common ground on any issue in order to make a difference in the lives of everyday Americans. It's time to get off the sidelines, break away from the extremists, get in the arena so we can find a bipartisan path forward. Well, what happened when someone compromised, worked in a bipartisan fashion on a continuing resolution? Well, Democrats paid that person back by joining with 8 what they deem extreme fringe Republicans to oust the Speaker of the House. So again, I believe it's very disingenuous. And then you see this rhetoric. I wish I could quote the whole thing from Pelosi. But Pelosi saying that Jordan as a speaker would be appalling. She goes through and she literally, it's almost brilliant how she can hit every single talking point that the Democrats have been touching on really since Trump. He's a threat to democracy. Our democracy is at stake. That's an exact quote from Nancy Pelosi because of Jim Jordan. They're throwing this around a lot. So Trump being the potential nominee, being the lead candidate, if he wins president, that's a threat to democracy. She goes through and talks about threats. Well, let's see. The whole thing, the assault on our democracy. And then she talks about, of course, January 6th. It's like you could study that in a lesson on just using talking points in some college class. The New York Post editorial board said, how long till House Republicans move to Russian roulette? And what they said is it went from, we're going to get rid of the main guy to musical chairs. How long before they go to Russian roulette? The case for simply bolstering the power of Speaker Pro Tem Patrick Henry so the House can conduct some normal business grows even stronger, but even that doesn't look good. Now, I will say that do you remember John Boehner? John Boehner and Newt Gingrich both agreed on the idea that McHenry is a lot better of a solution than gridlock and chaos. He should be empowered this week, and let's go on with the people's business. That is it. Oh, hey, one completely unrelated story. And I hate to end the program on this. Taxpayers are on the hook for at least $20 million for the Cuomo investigations. Former governor, disgraced governor, Andrew Cuomo. We are out of time for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Thank you to everybody who joined us. Thank you for all the messages. Thank you to our guest, Marshall Hyde, candidate for Corning City Council in the 4th Ward. Tomorrow, we're going to have former Congressman Tom Reed on the program. So join us starting at 7 a.m. for Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. Have a great day, everyone.